So we're approximately 2 weeks or so past the 2020 US election. And as a result, many people around the world were introduced to a company named Decision Desk HQ. Decision Desk HQ supplies real-time results data for media and financial companies around the world pertaining to elections, and specifically US elections at this point. Furthermore, Decision Desk HQ was chosen as one of the 7 media companies to make official race calls on Twitter. And what really captured the attention of many this year is that Decision Desk HQ really surprised the world, if you will, by calling the presidential election for Joe Biden approximately 27 hours before the Associated Press and other major news networks. So we're recording this presentation because Decision Desk HQ used DreamFactory as a critical component in its technology stack. So specifically, DreamFactory supplied Decision Desk HQ with an API platform and infrastructure services. And we worked, of course, closely with the Decision Desk HQ team in the months leading up to this event. And of course, even closer throughout the course of election week to ensure that the API infrastructure remained optimized and secure. So with that said, my name is Jason Gilmore. I'm the CTO of DreamFactory. And joining me today is Chris Green, who's the CTO of Decision Desk HQ. So Chris, could you take a brief moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's really nice to be on and really nice to be recording this. It's finally starting to get some sleep again after everything's over, which is nice. But yes, I mean, serving election results is a really crazy business. I've been with DDHQ since the spring of 2019, but I've worked personally in politics and elections since 2009. And this business has always been a little crazy, especially with the rise of social media, but it's even more so today. Obviously. I personally have worked in data infrastructure since 2001, starting with nonprofits and later moving into healthcare and then into media and elections. And to us, serving up election results is a critical part to the democratic process, and especially doing it timely and accurately. We consider that to be a public trust. And I'll just say, at the outset here, we couldn't be happier with DreamFactory. You helped us make this year's election results clear, concise, and accurate for millions of people in the U.S. and around the world.
Well, thank you very much. And on behalf of our team, we were certainly happy to play a part in this project. So why don't we take some time to walk through this project in, I guess, a chronological fashion. So maybe we can first start by talking about the project requirements, then move on to our respective IT environments and responsibilities, and then finally spend a few minutes, let's not spend a few weeks, a few minutes talking about how everything came together during election week. So why don't you just give the audience a taste of what requirements were associated with this project?
Sure. I think the chief requirement is insanity. Got to be a little crazy to this work. But yeah, so serving election results, obviously, it's not an easy job. The load that we have to serve can be really extreme and very peaky. The sources where we get our data, a lot of times we're relying on state and county websites and those sorts of sources. And so as you get those results in, they come in at different times or different rates, and so it's really pretty crazy job serving up results. Our production portfolio covers, of course, our API, which is the engine that powers our results delivery, but we also have customers using a custom embed product. And the embed product is it's essentially a no-tech team solution. And it allows our customers to show DDHQ election results right on their own websites, right? They take a script and they embed it into the site, and then, out pops a map that has all of our results, and it gets pulled in from our API every 30 seconds. And most of our big media companies and small media companies alike make very heavy use of this embed product. We also have our very own results.decision desk HQ, which is our forward-facing results website. And on results, we actually served over 500 million requests through election week, just on our website alone, which was, by far and away, one of the biggest event that we've had on that website since we launched it in 2018. We have TV stations and media companies that consume our API to power results, within their own platforms. We even have financial companies that monitor results from our API for potential changes in the markets. Internally, we make very heavy use of our API. We use it to power our own dashboards, alert for changes in each race. And so that's for our data science and our race call teams to know when and where votes are coming in, both at the county and town level in real time to assess and make race call decisions in every race in the entire country. And so it's really, really important that the API is stable and responsive, and we use it. Basically we eat our own dog food here, right? We use it for all of our own internal tools and teams as well. And so there's a lot riding on the data that we collect and serve. And all of this coming together was really one way that we were able to beat all these big players in the industry to the presidential call by 27 hours. Everything sort of firing on all cylinders, making great use of all of our own services and our own API, and really making sure that things were coming in and stable and operating properly. As far as how we decided the requirements for this project, we looked at the expected API traffic, and then working with you personally, you and I worked together. We chose a baseline that we decided that we absolutely must sustain for stability purposes, and that was 200 API requests per second. And then you and I and our teams together, we pushed the envelope to 500 and 1,000 requests per second, just to see how things would fare and make sure that the infrastructure would stand up in front of that. Jason, you and your team worked really hard. You tuned your end of the API fleet. I worked really hard with my team, and we tuned our backend services and our databases to accommodate all these different requests. We spent many testing sessions doing load testing, sustaining these levels for several hours at a time, just to make sure that the fully scaled fleet would perform under these pretty crazy conditions. So coming up with those API baselines was really important, and then making sure that through our load testing that things were stable and performant. And then finally, probably one of the biggest things here is we have to do all this securely, right? It's simple enough just to stand up an API and set up a bunch of services and all these things, but we have to be very cautious about our results, right? Especially with everybody looking at us. We don't want to make bad race calls. We don't want to be putting bad data out there and throwing any question into the safety and the sanctity of the results that we serve. And so we consider it to be paramount to the public that the public can trust our results and our race calls. I know that on your team, on the DreamFactory, and you repeatedly audited and tested your infrastructure. We audited and tested all of our services. On my end, we set up end-to-end by the second alerts for anything that changed in our data, errors in our system for all of our calls. And we had just countless numbers of people, real humans, watching all of our data and looking for unexpected activity, making corrections when and where needed, because it does happen from time to time that a county website may put up incorrect data, or a state website may put up incorrect data, and then later they'll down correct that. And so we were watching for these downstream issues and from the states and counties, and and all of this again was sort of working together as part of our requirements to be able to serve this all securely.
So for the
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was all this has to be delivered to our customers, and everything has to be done in seconds, right? There's no real error. There's no opportunity for error here. It's a really interesting project and a real good time.
And for the techies in the audience, just a quick note regarding the load testing. We really did this in two fashions. Initially, the goal was to establish a baseline. As Chris mentioned, that was 200 requests per second. So we used a third-party service called loader.io, which is a tool that we've used repeatedly at DreamFactory over the past few years to load test the platform for different projects. and loader.io is great, and I certainly recommend it. However, in the second phase of load testing, we turned to the open source load testing tool JMeter, and the reason for that really was twofold. We wanted to more flexibly load test our environment for very long periods of time. Now, to be clear, loader.io does offer that capability, but we wanted a little more flexibility in terms of not only running tests that went not just a few minutes, but went for hours. In fact, I think at one point we ran a load test that had a duration of, I think it was just over 4 hours.
Yep.
And furthermore, we wanted to run these longer load tests with many permutations of the API. And Chris, I don't know if you recall the exact number, but there are, of course, many different APIs for county races, for Senate races, et cetera. But in addition to that, there are various permutations of those APIs. So yeah, we wanted to test all of them over the course of a testing period, and JMeter provided us with the flexibility to do so.
Yeah, I think we ran about 58 different calls.
58.
And all of those serve different purposes, like you said, right? Some of them are state-based calls where we were pulling in, essentially every single race in the state by county. Some of them were very large calls looking at, every single U.S. House race in the country by county, and that's 435 races, times however many counties in every single state, right? I mean, it's a really, really big call there. Aggregate presidential calls, aggregate U.S. Senate calls. And, the purposes of that was to just really stress test the system, not only the API front end fleet, but also, back end database services as well, right? Because all of those, every single one of those calls touches, different parts of the database and, different tables or different views. And so, I wanted to make sure that I sort of was using our load testing as an opportunity to also stress test, our back end logic as well, just to make sure that, we're pulling all this data in, and it just helps identify any places that we had to tune or optimize on our end too.
Absolutely, and just kind of reflecting upon the many load testing sessions we undertook, it quickly became apparent early on that it wasn't good enough to just load test one component or the other. We really needed to see how everything came together, and in fact would coordinate. Okay, we're going to load test at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and could you please scale up your environment? So we would bring our environments completely online. We would scale them up, and then conduct that load test, which again would certainly towards the latter stages would require several hours of time, because we wanted to see that the load could be sustained over a long period of time, right? So with this project, it isn't the case that you're going to in a typical over the course of a typical hour, you're not going to see a lot of spikes in traffic. You're going to see steady, obviously elevated, as we'll talk about in just a bit, but elevated traffic, but it's going to be sustained over a long period of time. And we really wanted to be sure that the environment could sustain that load over a long period, which really, the bulk of requests took place really within about, I'd say 72 hours to 96 hours of the election, something like that.
Yep.
Great. So why don't we, with the requirements out of the way, why don't we talk a little bit about our respective infrastructure, right?
Yeah,
and we have a couple slides that I think will help illustrate some of the points that we'll touch upon. But why don't we go ahead and just start with the decision desk infrastructure?
Yeah, sure. So the great majority of our services are all built within Amazon Web Services. We're a heavy consumer of AWS. Our core database infrastructure, uses an Amazon Aurora global database cluster. And if you're not familiar with that product, it's an excellent product. It allows you to build a highly available cluster that's multi-availability zone within one specific data center region. So that's Virginia or California or Oregon. And then it also allows you to then duplicate that cluster in a read-only fashion across multiple regions. So you can have the same database cluster with the same data. It's a very low latency connection in multiple data centers. And so if you have something that goes down, you can fail over to a different data center and be right back up and running. And so having that multi-availability zone, multi-region redundancy was really important for us. Computing services largely run on top of EC2. We were prepared for just about anything on election night. So we had warm and cold sites set up at the ready for whole region-wide outage. Our results website, as I mentioned earlier, that's our public front for all of our results data, and as well as our customer, as well as our embeds, all get their results directly from API objects that we store in redundant S3 buckets served through CloudFront. So, rather than having our, each client, right, each browser talk directly to the API fleet, we instead grab those results from the API, save them as S3 blobs, and then serve those blobs, via the CDN on with CloudFront. And so that allows us to be extremely highly scalable for those, for those types of workloads. And which is really neat to see in practice. Actually, it's it's one of the ways that we were able to scale so massively, using this CloudFront content delivery network. It was really fun to watch. And I'll have a slide on that if you want to flip over to
Sure thing.
the graphs.
Yep.
Here, flip over one more for me.
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so these are graphs directly off of our CloudFront content delivery network, and so you can see I just pulled a sample of from November 2nd to November 6th, so just sort of the really critical craziness, and you can see over that duration between our results website and our embed products, we served almost 3 billion requests and nearly 400 terabytes of results data, which is really pretty cool when you think about all of our results data. We're not talking about massive images or or video files or anything here. We're talking about teeny tiny little JSON text blobs. If some of them are just a few bytes in size, up to a few hundred kilobytes when we're talking about full aggregate calls for the House or the Senate or the president. And so it's really pretty impressive, both the quantity of results that we served, but as well as just the sheer size, the number in terabytes that we serve when we're talking about this little text data. So we're pleased with how everything performed, sort of on that front end, side of the house. And of course, all that was pulled from our DreamFactory API fleet. And then all of our services are also used in conjunction with Cloudflare. Cloudflare is an excellent service that provides a web application firewall, so that's protections done, sort of at the DNS level there, distributed denial of service protection, and then load balancing, which we use in front of our AWS infrastructure. And so if you want to flip back over to the other slide, just briefly.
Yeah.
So
I think this is one of the most fascinating images.
Yeah, yeah. So these are a couple of a couple of pictures I pulled out of our Cloudflare account. So the first is, during election week, the distribution of queries made through Cloudflare by region, by their region in the world. And so, though our results and our embeds, data, those are not served through Cloudflare, all of the requests for our API, right? So DreamFactory, as well as all the requests for the front end of our results website, are all served through Cloudflare. And so we can see the number of queries and things that were done on those services through our Cloudflare account. And you can see here, I mean, the distribution across the world is really pretty interesting. I mean, obviously things are United States heavy in terms of which data center was accessing our data, but also Europe, as well as sort of a surprise to us, the amount of traffic that we received from Asia, and which is really fun to watch. And then you can see the lower graph there. So these are all the requests that we served through Cloudflare. Again, not the direct data requests for our embeds or for results, but the actual request to the API, as well as the front end of results. These are the raw API requests, through Cloudflare. So you can see, things sort of picked up pretty quickly there on election day, then just continued on. And this graph is sort of fun. If you look at it today, it sort of just continues on at a pretty heavy pace since election day. So it's pretty neat. A lot of people discovered us on election day and then the day after, and we've been able to sustain that traffic largely since then. People are really taking an interest in what we're doing. So it's really, really neat to see it all working and see everything sort of firing on all cylinders. Um, since we're talking about infrastructure, I think it is really important. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking through some of the reasons that I decided to use DreamFactory. So when I came on board and came on as CTO for Decision Desk HQ in the spring of 2019, I realized that we were going to have to make some changes to our API. And so I gave some consideration to rolling our own API fleet, which at the time, since 2016, DDHQ had our own API fleet, which was built on top of PHP Laravel and auto scaling with an EC2. And since we knew that we needed to make some changes to the API, I gave some very heavy consideration on what I wanted to do next. So I thought about upgrading that fleet. I thought about finding an API as a service, or using some other kind of service for it. And I gave a lot of consideration to the impacts of security, control of the fleet, control of our services, because all these are very, very important changes to us, right? And it must work, right? I have no choice; it must work. And I have a very limited testing window to make sure that it does, since elections are very peaky. It's when you get there, it's the day of. And so what is probably of paramount importance to me was the ability to confidently and securely manage our customer tokens, our API docs, all these things that sort of go into management of an API. And ultimately, I ended up choosing DreamFactory, I think, because the team at DreamFactory hit all the right buttons for me. I really like the idea of having more eyes than just me. DDHQ, I mean, we're a small startup, right? I mean, all this sounds really great, but we're a very limited team with a very limited budget as well. And so, when I was considering all these different options, moving over to AWS API Gateway, other APIs as service providers, I really, really like it. Really came away from my original conversations with DreamFactory feeling very good. From the first phone call, Jason, your team was psyched about the idea of serving election results with us. Everybody, was ready for the challenge. Although I'm not sure that everybody quite knew what the challenge really was going to entail at that point. But you guys really completely understood the security implications and worked hard, to understand our needs. DreamFactory had everything built in that I was looking for. Again, simple management of API tokens, users and roles, built-in docs. The interface is super easy to use, and you can put your own code and scripts in a couple of different very simple means. You already have integrations with all the services that we use, like Amazon S3. To me, working with DreamFactory really was a match made in heaven. It removed all the burden from me having to think about our API fleet, which that's a heavy statement to me, right? Because it's my job to make sure that everything is really running. And as I mentioned, we have such precious little time to make sure that things are right. And then during the election, there's no changes at that point, right? So we're either ready to fly or we aren't. But it's seriously, I learned to trust you, Jason, and your team, in all through election night. You guys were right there with me, and that was really important. Thanks to that, I never really gave more than a passing thought about the technical side or the scale of our API fleet, all during election week. And to me, it was really something special.
Your mention of the traffic being, well, first of all, thank you very much for that compliment. And I agree, we certainly appreciated the opportunity and loved working with you guys as well. Your mention of the traffic being peaky, because of course elections only, typically last a couple of days, really resonates with me, because although I haven't had the opportunity to work in an environment maybe on like Super Bowl Sunday or like a Black Friday environment at an e-commerce retailer, this very much reminds me of those sorts of situations where you do have traffic. Yes, it's there. However, in a flash, we go from 0 to 100 miles an hour, right? And that, as you can see from the Cloudflare chart here in the bottom right, that's effectively what happened, right? We had steady traffic coming in, but a lot of it was test traffic from various clients. And then, as you can see on Monday, it started ramping up even further, but at approximately, I think, 6 p.m. Eastern, more or less, when election results really started to show up, there was just an explosion of traffic. And was it nerve-wracking? Absolutely. But at the same time, it was really great to see really how smoothly everything went for the duration of the project.
Yeah. Yeah. We weren't quite sure what to expect either. I mean, it was,
Yeah,
I mean, you can plan for all the API traffic you want, and that's a fairly known quantity to us, but, I mean, we were prepared for anything, right? I mean,
exactly.
system-wide, backbone level outages on the internet. I mean, just, sort of all sorts of things. And so, some of that, a little bit of anxiety there as well, but, we had talked through all of that, and we were ready for it.
Great. So how about I'll spend just a few minutes talking about the DreamFactory side of things, like what did this infrastructure look like? So those of you who are familiar with DreamFactory are probably aware that our platform is primarily an on-premise solution. So it is installed within banks and auto manufacturers and chemical manufacturers and a lot of larger organizations who prefer to keep API-related infrastructure tightly integrated with other aspects of their enterprise. However, we've also offered a hosted solution for a number of years now. And this environment, like Decision Desks, is also built on top of AWS, and it uses Kubernetes. And we found that thus far it scales very well, and that feeling, of course, was certainly proved out in the last few weeks with the Decision Desk project. Within this hosted environment, each DreamFactory instance is completely isolated. It's separately scalable. And that's important because we need to suit the needs of different clients, right? Some clients have smaller projects. They don't really require a lot of resources. So using Kubernetes, we are able to manage each of those DreamFactory instances separately and then scale them up and down accordingly. And it's been really great. I have to say, being able to have that flexibility. Now, that said, given the specific project requirements laid out by Decision Desk HQ, we really wanted to, I don't want to say take the project in a different direction, but we wanted to continue using AWS Kubernetes, but isolate their environments even further, right? Because we wanted to maintain total control, have a total understanding from a monitoring perspective of what the cluster was doing, how it was behaving, and so forth. So we set up a separate cluster within our environment, and this cluster deployed, I guess what I would say are slightly customized versions of the standard DreamFactory environment. And what I mean by that is we just further optimized for volume. We configured PHP op cache. We tweaked PHP FPM even further from what's found in our hosted environment. We tweaked Nginx. Of course, we load balanced. There's no surprise here. We load balanced multiple DreamFactory instances. However, what's interesting about that is we did not really depart from the standard DreamFactory scaling approach. And what I mean by that, I can probably show this in a picture as well as I can explain it, is we use a standard multi-tier infrastructure that's very typical of any HTTP-based system you'd see today. And that is to say, we had a load balancer up front, we had a DreamFactory application cluster, which in this case scaled across multiple regions. We also have a caching cluster. I believe we used Redis in this case. And then, of course, we had a database cluster. And the database cluster is the system database that underlies DreamFactory and stores various preferences and configuration settings and things like that. Now, in addition to that, we wanted to really build out the monitoring infrastructure. We wanted to have all eyes on all aspects of this system. We wanted to know what volume looked like at all times. We wanted to know what CPU usage, what RAM usage, et cetera, looked like. So we used Prometheus and Grafana, which is something we've used on multiple projects. However, we took this opportunity to build out a number of new Grafana dashboards that work so well. In fact, we'll begin integrating them into our other hosted projects. And I have a couple screenshots here. The first is a infrastructure monitor, nothing particularly special here. So we're using Prometheus, which is a time-based monitoring solution. That data is presented within Grafana. And as you can see here, we're monitoring RAM across all nodes. We're monitoring CPU, core DNS CPU, and so forth. Secondarily, and this gets more into the custom Grafana dashboards that we worked on, we built out a custom API key volume monitoring solution. So naturally, we wanted to monitor API call volume on a per API key basis, right? So we built out another custom Grafana chart that shows key volume on a per key basis. It also shows API usage deviation, which is the chart in effectively the center of the screen. And that was important because we wanted to monitor for sudden changes in API volume, which could occur due to client misconfiguration. Perhaps a client was late turning on their production environment, and we did not want a misconfiguration to suddenly come in and start flooding our environment with traffic. So we were able to watch standard volume. We were able to watch API deviations, API key volume deviations. On the left, you can see there's a widget called slow requests. And thankfully, at the time I took the screenshot, there were none, fortunately. What this was showing was any latency associated with PHP FPM, right? So PHP FPM was processing, was handling processes being managed by the DreamFactory platform. And were there any slow requests, we wanted to know about them immediately. As you can see, there are other widgets here that I've heavily redacted just because we're not at liberty to show this data. Nonetheless, I can assure everybody it's a really cool, really cool dashboard.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun to build these out. As I mentioned in the leaks leading up to the election, we used extensive load testing to ensure the environment was working properly. And what was great is we had these dashboards at our disposal early on, and we were able to simultaneously test them out as well, right? Beyond performance, beyond monitoring, logically, we wanted as with all of our projects, to make sure security was up to par. So let's see, we invested in a very recent third-party security audit. We made extensive use of various auditing tools to ensure that not only the Kubernetes environment, but AWS, et cetera, we're all ready for the big day. So that said, we built out these environments, worked closely together, and then before we knew it, election day was almost here. So on the Friday, I believe, before the election, so that was 4 days before the election, we scaled our respective environments up to production levels. And then on November 2nd, which was the day before the election, we conducted one final load test just to make sure nothing was missed, and made some final team briefings. And then effectively, we just waited, right? We just waited for election results to begin rolling in around 6 p.m. Eastern. So, Chris, when that 6 o'clock hour more or less rolled about, I mean, what did you and your team have in mind? Like, what did you expect?
The slow burn of election week. Yeah, it's interesting. This, like I said, this isn't my first election day. But you know, in this case, for this election, we really didn't know what to expect. You know, people always say, you know, oh, this is unprecedented, right? With some degree of hyperbole, but in reality, this really truly was an unprecedented election cycle, like we've never seen before. You know, we internally, we didn't really know what to expect. You know, we weren't getting a lot of communication from the states and from the counties. And so, you know, in some areas of the country, we weren't even sure whether the state and the county authorities would report at all, right? Or report, you know, as they usually do. You know, would we only get a fraction of the vote in any given state or county immediately? You know, are we only going to get in-person votes, you know, and not mail-in votes, or you know, we didn't really know what to expect. And so internally, you know, we were prepared for anything. You know, as far as an infrastructure stuff is concerned, you know, we scaled, we tested, we've got all hands on deck, you know, our whole team, you know, we're all together, you know, in voice chat. You know, we've got all our alerts are running, our monitors are running, you know, everything is running, and we're basically just waiting to see what comes in. You know, this year our team was, you know, pretty much all remote because of the pandemic. You know, we've gone through all the contingencies that we needed to think through. You know, we had plans that were, you know, ready for us to activate in case we saw, you know, anything, you know, suspicious or strange with the data that we were getting, you know, from downstream. You know, this election was very, very intense.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. It was a very long day, and frankly, night on the 3rd. And as you were talking through this, I just returned to the two graphs that showed exactly what this spike in traffic looked like. I mean, it was effectively quite static, and then once those results started pouring in, it was quite something to see exactly how hectic, if you will, things got from a data standpoint. Really, I mean, on the DreamFactory side, at this point, our only priority was to monitor this environment and respond accordingly, right? If we needed to scale the system up further based on excessive load use, we certainly monitored that. Really, though, I mean, we were, in hindsight, scaled up really well beyond the stated specifications, and that was really on purpose.
Yep.
So even as that load increased throughout Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in particular, we really did not have to tune really anything from a performance standpoint. But of course, we did very closely monitor everything, and we're really pleased how everything turned out.
Yeah, there's nothing like watching your website go from thousands of visitors to hundreds of thousands of visitors in the span of a couple of minutes. It's
Yes.
it's
Yes.
really something special. election day, and for us, it was election week. I think panned out with few small surprises. Thankfully we were prepared and our teams were prepared. I think between probably our entire team at DDHQ, nobody got more than an hour or two of sleep, every night for probably, the better part of a week or a week and a half. We were waiting for results to come in, and, it was important that we were up at night to both watch for issues as well as watch for data coming in. A lot of the authorities, especially the bigger counties in the country, they didn't stop counting. They were releasing results all through the night, and so we had teams that were available, and our data teams and our race call teams, and on the tech side, especially myself, we were up. It was a lot of late nights and a lot of watching, but it was really important for us. This isn't a job for us that you can, you're done after 6 or 8 hours, and you can go to bed.
No,
So
no, certainly not.
yeah, it was intense. It was a long week, but our API fleet, our infrastructure services, our clients, everything remains stable and available, and largely error free, apart from a few blips and the occasional heart attack here and there, with downstream issues. But to be honest with you, from an infrastructure standpoint, I couldn't have been more pleased with how the week panned out. It was really, really exciting and really, really neat to sort of watch everything come together, and then watch all of our results get served. Over the week we served, as we showed the graph earlier, but throughout the rest of the week, we served nearly 500 terabytes worth of results data, and well over 3 billion. Now I think we're approaching 4 billion requests for our data, since election day, all powered by our excellent infrastructure. Again, we were able to beat the networks and on the presidential call 27 hours ahead of everybody else. We were well in hand with all the rest of our monitoring and our race calls for the House and the Senate. We served a lot of requests for a lot of down ballot races, which is something that we've done some down ballot stuff before, but this was we did a lot more this cycle. It was an incredible election cycle for us.
Fantastic. And it was a really incredible project for us. And Chris, I'd really like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to jump on this call today and walk through this. I know you're tired and probably still catching up on sleep. So I really do appreciate it. If anyone viewing this video is into, election data, minutia, et cetera, I suggest signing up for the Decision Desk newsletter over at decisiondeskhq.com. A couple of days ago, I think it was late last week, I actually received my first installment, and I sometimes feel like I'm suffering from newsletter exhaustion these days. It's kind of funny how things have come full circle, whereas years ago, email newsletters were very much a thing, and then they were very much not a thing, and now we're back to email newsletters all day, every day now, it seems like. And it's hard to stand out from the crowd, but I was really impressed by the Decisions Desk HQ email, because it among other things broke down the Wisconsin electorate in like great detail, of course drawing upon all of the data that's been compiled.
Yep.
So really neat. Just something to check out if you're into election data. And again, thanks, Chris, for the opportunity, and we certainly look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, I appreciate the plug for the newsletter. We have if you think our race call teams are cool, we have a really, really talented group of people who are doing writing for the newsletter and for our blog. And we, again, being one of the scrappy startup players in this space, it's really fun for us to be able to do things like that Wisconsin electorate breakdown. So thanks for the plug there. And I mean, honestly, we're looking really forward to the Senate runoffs in January 5th. The only thing that we really couldn't call so far yet is control of the Senate. There's both Senate seats in Georgia are up for election in runoffs, which is, you know, an interesting quirk of our elections here. You know, the fact that we've got both of these races gone to runoff, and that's on January 5th. And so, you know, follow along with us. You know, we'll be serving results for that at results.decision-hq.com. And then we're going to move on pretty quickly after that and start thinking about the midterm elections in 2022. We're going to be tooling up to serve some international elections as well across the world. So, you know, we want to start getting into, you know, we love elections, right? And we like serving elections data. And so we're going to be focusing a lot of our attention on getting to some international stuff as well. And we're going to do all this with DreamFactory by our side. And we're going to keep challenging the big players in this industry. You know, we consider it to be of paramount importance. You know, we're free of influence. We're going to deliver accurate results to the world. And it's a really, really neat project, and you know, and everybody can follow along with us. It's really, really exciting.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for your time, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Okay.